Här berättar 8 av dem om sina unika upplevelser med 20 års perspektiv.
I don't think astronauts are really in the mold of explorers as such. I think astronauts are basically just overachievers. And they are a group of overachievers, and I'll be very honest about this. White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, number one son, Midwest, college educated, under the age of 35, under 6 feet tall, military flight school, gone on to be test pilots, and they carried that military flying career to the ultimate, which is to go into space.
When I was a lad, the moon did have a strange fascination for me, to the point where I actually thought I was going to be able to go there someday. And I know today that's probably pretty normal. But I just, when I looked at the moon, a strange feeling overcame me, and I just thought that someday I'd be able to go there. And I told our neighbors that I was going to go to the moon, told my mother and father, but they all laughed at me. My mother was a little more direct. She said, "Son, that's foolishness." She said, "Man will never be able to go to the moon."
Did I think about the possibility of dying? Sure. It's sort of like you used to turn on your radio or television and about 2.5 hours before the launch and you know, Walter Cronkite would be down there telling you that the crew of Apollo 12 had gotten up and had their little mini physical, and they were eating the traditional breakfast of steak and eggs. Might even flash a little picture of us in there, and now they were down at the pad being buttoned in, and he'd get down to T-minus 60 minutes, and he'd say, "It's absolutely amazing. You know, Commander Conrad's gone to sleep. The data shows he's gone to sleep." Well, what he didn't really tell you was that Captain Commander Conrad had been up all night the night before, staring at the ceiling, saying, you know, tomorrow these guys are really going to send me, and that's a big Hummer, and you know, something could happen. So, and now you're down at the pad, and it's warm in the suit, and the coolant loop's not running too good, and you just finally pass out. And I mean, really, I kind of think that's the way it was. But again, speaking only for myself.
Without a doubt, as I look back on the achievements of Apollo, in particular on our mission, the first landing, the igniting of the engine and executing the powered descent to successfully transfer from being in orbit or being in a coasting flight to actually setting down on another planetary surface was a monumental accomplishment.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for powered descent. Retro? Go. Fido? Go. Guide? Go. Control? Go. Telcom? Go. GNC? Go. Ecom? Go. Surgeon? Go. Eagle looking great, your go. Right. Altitude, velocity, light. 3.5 down. You're looking great to us, Eagle. 13 forward. Okay, looks like it's home. Roger, we got good data. 60 seconds. Lights on.
There were some very tense moments as the fuel quantity predictions were reaching that 60 seconds level.
Down a half. 30 seconds. Forward.
And a little bit, it was 30 seconds. I could see that we're in the final process of settling down, and it was very settling, calming to see the light come on, indicating that the probe that was on the landing gear had just touched the ground, and I knew that we were home free at that point. And it was just a question of making that last second final touchdown and then shutting the engine off.
Drift into the right level. Contact light. Bam. Okay, engine stop. Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot. I'm at the foot of the ladder. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
Well, I used the sole of a lunar boot, similar to the one I'm wearing here. And here it is embedded in this special mixture that I used. I just put it in right there. And it made the same mark in this painting as these moon boots I'm wearing here did on the surface. In fact, here's a left print, here's another left one, and here's a right one and a right one. What I've done is kind of make me running across here with moon boots. Then I get this hammer that I had on the moon. Matter of fact, I was supposed to leave it on the moon, and I decided to just bring it back because I'd used it so much. It meant so much to me. And what I did was, when this texture was wet, is pound in it, scrape on it, push on it, pound it just as I did on the moon, and try to think of new ways that I can make this work. In fact, this hammer here's a painting over here that's me using this exact hammer. You can see it here in my hand, and I'm not pounding with the end of it like this because the suit, it was so difficult to move my arm straight in the suit that I turned the hammer sideways like this and would pound this way.
Whoa. Hang on. Here, that little fella.
Seven and a half years ago, I opened a wholesale beverage distributorship in Gulfport, Mississippi. I am here on the beautiful Mississippi Gulf Coast, and we've got us a small company, and we've got a variety of brands of beverages. Coors was our first franchise, the Adolph Coors Company, and their products. And then over the period of the last 7 years, we have expanded into other beer products and wine coolers, and we're out trying to relieve everybody's thirst.
One more coming at you.
As we left the Earth, it reminded me of moving up in a fast elevator. I could see the Earth start to diminish in size. First, I could see it, and couldn't see both sides at once if I looked right at the center. And gradually it got smaller and smaller over a period of 30, 40, 50 minutes. And then it got down to something like this. And thing I thought was, how is everybody I know down there? Only people with us were Dick Gordon, Pete Conrad, and I said, everybody I've ever seen is down on that ball. Everybody I saw on television at the Super Bowl, everybody I've known in school, I mean, all these people, they're down on a ball that was about this big, and it seemed impossible. But at the time, when everybody was there but the three of us, it was hard to believe.
On the fourth day of our mission, I think it was, I went outside the spacecraft to test the portable life support system, the backpack, which contained all of the oxygen and cooling and radio and all of that.
Okay, Dave, come on out.
Okay. Taking pictures of everybody taking pictures.
When Dave Scott, who is photographing this from the command module, said, "Hey, I just had a camera jam. It failed. Can I take 5 minutes to try and unjam the camera?" And Jim McDivitt, who was the commander of the flight, said, "Okay, Dave, take 5 minutes. Rusty, don't move." So there I was with 5 minutes when Dave was busy, Jim was busy doing something, and I literally had nothing to do except just look at where I was. No sound, nobody was talking, completely silent. And here, 17,000 miles an hour going across the surface of the Earth, incredibly beautiful planet down below me. And I decided this was the time when my responsibility was simply to really let all of that come in. What was happening? What was going on? Here I am, a little farm boy from New Jersey, and yet here I am in space. So all of these questions just came flooding into my mind. I mean, what am I doing here? How did I get here? What does this mean? Who am I? What does it mean when I say I? I mean, this is really a very special thing with life moving out from the Earth. And that's an amazing moment in the history of evolution. Now, all of that, I suppose I went too far, because at that time, all I was doing was just opening up to the experience. It was afterward that I began to really realize that the questions which came to me at that moment had a lot more in them, and the experience fed those questions much more deeply than I ever analyzed at the moment. I didn't come up with all sorts of conclusions. I was just trying to open up to the experience.
What happened was, as I looked at Earth and saw the cosmos, called the entire universe, laid out before me, with this tiny little planet and those millions and billions of stars and galaxies and galactic clusters, all laid out in such magnificent array, it was an internal sense of joy. It was a high. It was a wow. And the irrefutable feeling within myself that this is an intelligent system I'm looking at, that it is not, as we in science had characterized it, a random collection made from the random collisions of energy matter, that there is a coherence, that there is an intelligence palpable in the universe.
After separating from Al Shepard and Ed Mitchell, I was then by myself in the command module, and I had my own flight plan and my own missions to accomplish. But one of the stronger feelings of this being by yourself in this spacecraft built for three was going through this area of the moon that is so totally dark. It is the quarter of the moon that's not lit by earth light nor sunlight. And as you pass through this total darkness, it is so incredibly dark, you almost, I swear you can feel it. And the spacecraft drops in temperature, and with condensation on the bulkheads, it gets a clammy feeling to it. So here you are feeling this darkness, and then suddenly the sunlight comes in the windows with no warning. Because on the Earth, of course, we have the atmosphere to give us a twilight. Around the moon, one instant, you're in total darkness with all of these feelings, and then the next instant, it's sunlight, and you just feel good. You think this is a neat feeling.
Down to the pad. And that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me.
What were your first words when you stepped out onto the moon?
God, it may have been a small step for Neil, but it was a big step for a little fellow like me.
Had you thought of that before?
Oh, absolutely. Had money on it.
Oh, when I was coming in for landing on the moon, I was very excited, and so in order to contain that excitement, to be calm and collected, I had to remind myself frequently as we were coming in that I was back in the simulator down at the Kennedy Space Center. And that way I could be very cool and get everything done just as I had in the simulator. Turned out it was the best simulation that I had ever done.
Man! Hey, let me come over just a second. Stay right there. It's also like sundial again. Yeah, powdered.
I knew that strange things were happening while I was on the moon, and then I was able to put it all together, after I came back. The fact that, I just sensed that God was there. Never saw God, but I just was very impressed that he was there by the things that happened, such as the discovery of the Genesis rock, that white rock, because it was like God had just laid it there for us and directed us to that very spot up on the side of the mountain. He didn't want us to miss it, so he made it very easy.
Oh, man, look at that. Look at the lamp. Almost see twinning in there. Guess what we just found? Guess what we just found? I think we found what we came for. Crystal rock, huh? Yes, sir. You better believe it. Yes, sir. Oh, boy. I think we might have ourselves something close to, I got it, no sweat. What a beaut. That is really a beauty, and beautiful. Bag it up. Bag it up. Okay, make this bag number 196 a special bag. Yes, sir. First one. Don't lose your bag now, Jim. Oh, boy.
It was just a very significant time in my life to be on another world, a world where there was no life, there was no sound, there was no sky, just looking up into the blackness of space, but looking up and marveling at the beauty of the earth. And there it was, in the blackness of space, but so small that I could hold it between my fingers like a little marble. It was just this size. I could hold it between my fingers, or really I could cover it with my thumb. My thumb was a little bigger then because I had the space gloves on. But then in a spiritual sense, I felt magnified because I was holding God's special creation between my fingers and really seeing it with his eyes. And so I came back changed.
I remember when I was told that I had gotten in the program, when Dick Slayton called me to tell me I had been accepted. I had a long drive. I used to drive about 19 miles from the Naval Air Station. Miramar, California, where I was stationed, to home, and I remember driving home and thinking about just that. You know, would this change me, and would it change the rest of the people? So I think because I thought about it, I don't think it did. I mean, I think I thought about it from the very beginning.
I think almost everybody that went to the moon became more like they really were down deep inside. What occurred to all of us, I think, in my opinion, was that we all wanted to go to the moon. We all wanted to walk on the moon. We all wanted to fly in space. And so anything else we wanted was kind of put down low on the totem pole. And then when we actually did go into space and walk on the moon or whatever, then we accomplished our dream, our lifelong dream, and then that let the next dream come to the surface. For some people, they had a next dream, like myself, to be an artist, although I didn't even know it. And for other individuals, they had other dreams. And for some unfortunate ones, I think, they didn't have a dream to replace the dream of going to the moon. So when they got back, they had a sense of kind of emptiness because they'd accomplished what they'd always wanted, and nothing replaced it.
I knew that after Apollo 11 there probably would not be another mission like this, and I detected a bit before the flight that there was going to be this void of what happens next in my life. And I just sort of made up my mind I wasn't going to deal with that until the time came. And when the time came, I still didn't know exactly what to do.
Any depression is a very gradual thing. I think that seeps into your life maybe 6 months after a flight when you realize, hey, it's all gone, all the attention's gone, now I'm back just to being Joe Pilot again, and I've got to start looking for another flight, or I've got to start looking for something else to do. And that's kind of when the realization sinks in that, hey, it's, you know, that flight's gone and it's in the history books. And, you know, the next flight is gone and now people are focused on that crew, so, you know, we're sort of history.
I thought that shortly after the flight and decided I really didn't want that to be the high point of my life. I was only 41 at that time and there was a lot of living to do. And so I started looking for other challenges that I thought could be as important and as satisfying as that one. Well, in the last 18 years, shortly after leaving NASA, retiring from that program, I founded the Institute of Noetic Science to explore the nature of consciousness. I would hope that my efforts in understanding our inner space, I would like that to be as important as having gone to the moon.
Noetic Sciences, I'll connect to that department.
My title is Staff Vice President, International Business Development for McDonnell Douglas Corporation. I meet not only the airline people, but the defense people in many of these countries, and it's been very satisfying to make good friends while we are, in fact, selling them a weapon system, maybe, or whatever. And convinced that what we have is the best, and I like to see us succeed in those campaigns, and so you know you have to believe in what you're doing, and I believe in it, and I enjoy it.
I recall the Wright brothers. First flight, I believe it was in 1903. When Lindbergh threw to the Atlantic, I can never forget it. And that was in May 1927. was in the hospital in the old hammer and chisel days when they operated on a mastoid. And they didn't have penicillin. We were at the NASA base there in Florida when Stewart went to the moon. And that was a very emotional event. We have your very own laying up there 360 feet in the air, and just blasting off into eternity, out of this world, really. Yeah, 360 feet. And that was somewhat longer distance than the first flight of the Wright brothers.
We are in the hills of eastern Turkey. I can say in the mountains of eastern Turkey, because we're at the foot of Mount Ararat. It's called Mount Aridog in Turkish, and that means painful mountain. And I know that firsthand, that it is a very painful mountain. But it's a very beautiful mountain, and particularly this morning, as we stand here at the base of it. And it's a mountain that holds many mysteries. And one of those mysteries, as you know, is the Ark of Noah. Many people believe that the Ark of Noah is up there somewhere. I'm one of those believers that not only do I believe the Ark of Noah existed once, but I believe there's still evidence today that can be found up on this mountain. And we've been searching for that evidence for many years now. And we continue in that quest, looking for evidence of Noah's Ark. But again, we're looking for the will of God. Is this the year that we should search? Is this the year that we will find it? We're just very hopeful and prayerful.
I met astronaut Warden in the launch room of the Kennedy Space Center, the room which is filled with some of the machinery that helps rockets get started to the moon.
I'm very happy that you're here.
May I just launch right into the question?
Certainly.
These are questions that reflect children's concerns about exploration in space.
Well, they're probably the same concerns that everyone has, friend.
How do you go to the potty when you're flying to the moon? A very young friend of mine asked that and was concerned about it.
Well, I think that's a very, very good question. And bless children for asking the question, because sometimes grown-ups don't like to ask those sorts of questions, and I think children are honest and open enough so that they'll ask that kind of a question. But we go to the potty on the way to the moon and back, just like we do here on the ground. The only difference is that when we make a BM, we collect it in a plastic bag, and we save it, and we bring it back with us. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's exactly the same as here on Earth. Well, one of the first copies of that came back down to the Cape without me knowing about it. And I think it was the night before, maybe the 2 nights before the launch, the guys at the Cape piped Mr. Rogers' show throughout the crew quarters, where there was the prime crew, the backup crew, the support crew, and some of the managers from Houston were all in attendance down there. And I got a lot of laughs out of that. It was a little hard for them to understand me doing a show with Mr. Rogers.
Hey, Ted, Ski, one thing is to keep them short. You might say that.
Rusty, what the organization that you formed of all the astronauts, what do you want to do with that group? Where do you want to take it? Obviously, this book is part of your effort, I guess.
Well, we have a number of different purposes, Charlie. We want to come together to get to know each other and to share professionally the experience of flying in space and some of our common technical problems and challenges.
Yes, you have an association now, not only of Americans and Soviets, but how many nations in all represented?
17 total. There've been people from 20 nations total in orbit so far, and we have members from 17 of those 20.
Mr. Alexandrov, is that same feeling in the Soviet cosmonaut program that man is meant to be out there?
Yes. Cosmonauts and astronauts have feelings, and we feel responsibility to preserve life of the Earth, and we must think about future our children on the planet. And I think too for things my friend Rusty.
Well, the fact that Rusty does that doesn't surprise me. You know, Rusty was, how should I say, maybe you could consider back in those days, Rusty was our token hippie. Rusty was the only guy in the group that grew a beard, and part of it, I think he knew it bothered everybody that he wandered around with a beard, and finally, after I think Rusty felt that his beard had the effect that he wanted it to have, he went and shaved it off, and nobody said a word to him, and it drove him crazy. And finally, about 3 days after he shaved it off, he had to say something to us. Didn't you? Have you guys noticed something that I've done? Because we weren't about to tell him we'd noticed that he'd shaved his beard off. So, Rusty represented, some of the things the rest of us didn't, and we needed that to be balanced.
It was hard for some of for the astronauts to adjust. All week long, while they were gone, they had a cast of thousands to wait upon them to do whatever they wanted to do. They are the darlings of everywhere they go, and they come home on Friday night, and the air conditioner broke down, or the washing machine quit, or I'm tired of being in the house all week with kids. So, I think it was definitely hard. You know, you walk in and you're used to everybody saying yes no matter what you say. And here's this woman who says, life is tough, and I definitely think it was hard.
I'm not sure it was all that good on the road.
Okay. Well, it wasn't all that good at home all the time.
No, but anyway, yeah.
Well, I don't want to really delve into all of that. On the other hand, it was very difficult if we weren't trained to be quasi-celebrities and in the public eye so much. It's quite clear that our families weren't either. And I must say, I didn't, and I don't think many of us handled that very well. And so there were a number of divorces as a result of it. I was divorced as a result of it. And I will say my personal life has been somewhat turbulent ever since.
I was strolling on the moon one day in a merry, merry month of December. Now, May's the month. May, that's right. May is the year of the month. When, much to my surprise, a pair of money eyes.
Hello, Orion. This is Houston.
Hi there. We lost you for a while.
Yeah, we sure did. Over hill, Landale. We'd like you to leave immediately. If not sooner. My golly, this time goes fast.
I've kept this painting. It's one of my early paintings, but I've kept it because it reminded me of running and moving on the moon and how it's different than on Earth and how it's fun up there. The problem is we were up there to do a certain job, and so we'd be running along, let's say, to get to the next site to take a sample, and we'd be enjoying it, and I'd be thinking to myself, boy, this is fun, this is great. I'd like to just stop for a minute and see how high I can jump or how far I can leap, all these things you'd like to do. And then I would say to myself, hey, I'm up here at taxpayers' expense. I can't do this. We have jobs to do. And so I'd kind of get my mind off it and say, what am I going to do when we finally get to the next site? What samples I'm going to collect? It'd be wonderful to go back to the moon and just have fun there. In fact, that's what's going to happen in centuries to come. They'll have Disney worlds not only in Florida and not only in California, but they're going to have them in space stations, and they're going to have them on the moon. People will be able to go there, and it won't seem so amazing to go there any more than 200 years ago. It would seem amazing to go from Europe to Disneyland. It didn't even exist. Nobody even lived in California. So someday, a couple hundred years from now, people will go to the moon and they'll jump up. The kids will have more fun. They'll say, take us there, Dad. We've been to the one in Florida. We've been to the one in California. Let's go up to the moon and have our 2-week vacation. And they'll get in a rocket ship and go. And a couple hundred years from now, it'll be simple to go to the moon, and kids will rent a spacesuit for an extra $20 or $30 and get out and run around, jump up and down, do the things that we did. Seem everyday and commonplace.
Got it. Wait a minute, you're not getting away from there without me getting your picture. Hey, this is perfect with the limb and the rover and you and the old flag. Here we go, come on. All right, Roger. And you're cleared for takeoff. Roger, understand. We're number 1 on the runway. Roger. Proceeded, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector good. Ag thought. Yes, that engine performing very well. Roger, you have good thrust. Good order. And we show an altitude of 2,700 feet. Awful lot of static, Jack. We break lock? Yeah.
One of the unique aspects of a lunar mission is the fact that the command module pilot, even though he's by himself, has a way home. He is flying the spacecraft that can leave the moon and come back to Earth. Until Al and Ed rendezvoused, why, they were not in that situation. But the command module pilot can come home by himself. In fact, I trained in the command module a lot by myself. So you could do that. I think it would be a very lonely trip home, having to leave your 2 compatriots either on the moon or have to be on the moon, because if they'd get into lunar orbit, somehow we'd get them. So yes, it would be wouldn't be a pleasant trip home, but the command module pilot could come home by himself. You would not do that except as a last resort. Obviously, you would stay until everything had been exhausted and you had just enough oxygen left to get home, or everybody had decided that, hey, there's no sense staying any longer, let's come. It's not something that we talked about a lot. It's probably not something anybody even thought about a lot, but the reality was there.
being put on a pedestal, being singled out to be different is not easy. Some people thrive on seeking out attention and wanting to be different and appreciated, or being on stage. So dealing with people in that fashion makes some of us more self-conscious than others, makes us a little ill at ease. And if that is what being a hero means, then it is one of the more challenging things for some people. And it's not always easy to do what people would like us to do, or to behave in that fashion. We try to do the best that we can, and sometimes we succeed, and other times we may not live up to our own expectations or other people's, but we are doing the best that we can.
What I'm trying to do is do paintings of all the things that we did during this first exploration of another world. Because all of us that were alive to do this aren't going to be around 30, 40, 50 years from now, or forever after. There's going to be a curiosity, I think, as human beings go out and explore the rest of the solar system, and even out into the stars in the centuries to come, what it was like the very first time. And so I like to show the drilling part. I'm going to show anything that occurred during these missions. I'd like to show them in a way that maybe makes human beings understand a little bit more about what went on during this period of history and what the people were like. Because, in my opinion, people don't change. The same kinds of people, Lewis and Clark, are probably the same kinds of people as Dave Scott and Jim Irwin that went to the moon. They're that thinking way. In some years, let's say 1,000 years from now, when someone's going out to the first star, there'll be an equivalent personalities and interests of human beings to do that Dave Scott shows in this painting.
Flying in space, I think, caused me to see the world in a totally different way than I had seen it before. Not just superficially, I mean, not purely the visual, physical phenomena, but the fact that you fly around the Earth every hour and a half, 16 sunrises and sunsets every day. I mean, you go around the whole planet in 90 minutes. You really end up with a gut feeling, not an intellectual, academic feeling, but you end up with a real gut feeling about this planet and how big it is or how small it is. And the fact that all of us, everything that we know of that lives, depends upon this interlocked system of the ecosystem, the ecosphere, the biosphere of the planet. We're all in it together, and that comes gradually through, I think, in a way which you would never get out of a book or a television program or anything of that kind. I mean, this is a personal experience. So that sense of the oneness of all life around the planet, the interrelatedness, not a mushy feeling, but I mean a realistic understanding of the relatedness of all life.
I didn't learn anything new philosophically or anything by being able to travel that far and go to the moon. If I learned one thing, I guess I learned when we were out there that the Earth is pretty insignificant when you get out there a ways and you realize all the rest of the stuff is out there. And then going to the moon, in astronomical terms, is we didn't go very far. You know, there's a lot of space out there, and going 250,000 miles, we didn't really go very far.
I ask myself, you know, what can I do with my life, the few years that I have left on the Earth, that I can be of service to people? Because life is so short, and I've been reminded of the shortness of life because, you know, several times I've come close. Well, last summer, you know, I was actually dead for a few minutes when my heart stopped. So I realize that my time is short, but I think it's only what I do for God that's going to last for eternity. So I want to serve God, and I think that the discovery of the Ark of Noah might be a very useful discovery for everyone, because they'll be brought closer to God.
I think our going into space was a watershed event in human history. That breaking out of this planet and starting to explore the solar system and later on the universe is about as significant as when the first sea creatures crawled out on the land. And I think there's a certain responsibility for those of us that have done that to leave to posterity our thinking, our experience, and what it meant to us. And thus, I try to do that and let history evaluate whether what we were seeing and doing was crazy or whether indeed it was the beginning of a new epoch for human history.
And I know today that's probably pretty normal. But I just, when I looked at the moon, a strange feeling overcame me, and I just thought that someday I'd be able to go there. And I told our neighbors that I was going to go to the moon, told my mother and father, but they all laughed at me. My mother was a little more direct. She said, "Son, that's foolishness." She said, "Man will never be able to go to the moon."
Did I think about the possibility?
A little bit. It was 30 seconds. I could see that we're in the final process of settling down, and it was very settling, calming to see the light come on, indicating that the probe that was on the landing gear had just touched the ground, and I knew that we were home free at that point. And it was just a question of making that last second final touchdown and then shutting the engine off.
Drift into the right, level. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
I'm at the foot of the ladder. I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man. One giant leap for mankind.
Här berättar 8 av dem om sina unika upplevelser med 20 års perspektiv.
think astronauts are really in the mold of explorers as such. I think astronauts are basically just overachievers. And they are a group of overachievers, and I'll be very honest about this. White, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, number one son, Midwest, college educated, under the age of 35, under 6 feet tall, military flight school, gone on to be test pilots, and they carried that military flying career to the ultimate, which is to go into space.
When I was a lad, the moon did have a strange fascination for me, to the point where I actually thought I was going to be able to go there someday.
Possibility of dying, sure. It's sort of like you used to turn on your radio or television and about 2.5 hours before the launch, and you know, Walter Cronkite would be down there telling you that the crew of Apollo 12 had gotten up and had their little mini physical, and they were eating the traditional breakfast of steak and eggs. Might even flash a little picture of us in there, and now they were down at the pad being buttoned in, and he'd get down to T-minus 60 minutes, and he'd say, it's absolutely amazing. You know, Commander Conrad's gone to sleep. The data shows he's gone to sleep. Well, what he didn't really tell you was that Captain Commander Conrad had been up all night the night before staring at the ceiling saying, you know, tomorrow these guys are really going to send me, and that's a big Hummer, and, you know, something could happen. So, and now you're down at the pad, and it's warm in the suit, and the coolant loop's not running too good, and you just finally pass out. And I mean, really, I kind of think that's the way it was. But again, speaking only for myself.
Without a doubt, as I look back on the achievements of Apollo, in particular on our mission, the first landing, the igniting of the engine and executing the powered descent to successfully transfer from being in orbit or being in a coasting flight to actually setting down on another planetary surface was a monumental accomplishment.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for powered descent. Retro, go. FIDO, go. Guide, go. Control, go. Telcom, go. GNC, go. Ecom, go. Surgeon, go. Eagle looking great, your go. Right. Altitude, velocity, light. 3.5 down. You're looking great to us, Eagle. 13 forward. Okay, looks like it's holding. Roger, we got good data. 60 seconds. Lights on.
There were some very tense moments as the fuel quantity predictions were reaching that 60 seconds level.
Down a half.